The first 10 minutes of our river raft trip, Zachary didn't hesitate to skip the 3-person raft and grab a two-seater built just for couples. I stepped forward to climb aboard, but he caught Zoe's outstretched hand instead. Mia. Zoe can't swim. I've got to look out for her, find someone else to share a raft with. I swallowed the sharp hurt rising in my chest and climbed onto a random raft alone, where the current picked up speed. The water slammed hard against our vessel. It knocked me straight overboard. Zoe stood on her raft, grinning as I thrashed in the churning water. Look how ridiculous she looks flailing around. Act like you don't know her. Zachary twisted his head away, angling his bad right ear toward me just like every other time he'd refused to listen to a single word I said. I choked on river water, lightheaded and on the verge of blacking out, until a lifeguard hauled me onto the muddy shore. Tears burned behind my eyes as I watched their raft drift further downstream. Zachary never glanced back once. Try to catch up with us later, he called over the current. I bowed my head and spat dirty river water from my mouth. Their boat was gone, far out of reach, and honestly, I didn't even want to chase it anymore. I floated all the way to the finish alone. But Zachary and Zoe were nowhere to be found when I arrived. I waited for hours, until a resort staff member walked over to tell me the pair had hopped the very first shuttle bus back to the lodge ages ago. I hurried to the shuttle pickup zone, searching every bench, but there was no sign of them. Dusk had fully settled by the time I dragged myself back to the mountain lodge. The second I pushed open the front door, I saw Zachary lifting a fork to feed Zoe a bite of food. The moment they spotted me walking in, their faces twisted into unmasked irritation. We agreed we'd stick to a schedule before this trip started. Do you have any sense of time at all? I told you I hate waiting more than 5 minutes for anyone. The warm scent of dinner hung thick in the air. Every dish laid out on the table was something Zoe loved to eat. My voice came out soft and shaky. I couldn't stand up after the fall. I hit my leg on sharp rocks. Enough. Zachary cut me off before I could finish speaking. We're supposed to be enjoying this vacation. Don't be so dramatic. Zoe went through the whole raft ride too. Why isn't she complaining non-stop? I opened my mouth to argue, but Zachary turned his head away again, that bad right ear facing my direction. All desire to explain vanished in an instant. A dull, throbbing pain pulsed from the gash on my knee, and dark purple bruises bloomed all over my thighs. I walked over to the bed, grabbed a bottle of antiseptic wound spray, and tended to my injuries alone. Zachary and Zoe picked their conversation back up like none of what had just happened existed. I glanced over at them. Zachary tilted his head left, smiling and nodding at every word Zoe spoke. Zachary hadn't always been this way. Once, he'd listen patiently to every trivial thought that crossed my mind, laughing and responding to every silly complaint I voiced. When he confessed his feelings for me, he'd covered our entire bedroom floor in bouquets of flowers. After we started dating, fresh blooms were delivered to my bedside every single morning without fail. Everything shifted the second Zoe came home from overseas. She was Zachary's childhood friend, the girl both our families adored, the person who always got priority over me. His so-called family. River water dripped from my tangled hair onto my open wounds, and I suddenly remembered I hadn't packed a change of dry clothes. Zachary, did I put my spare clothes in your luggage? Zachary ignored my question entirely, still keeping his right ear pointed toward me. His left turned fully to Zoe. It was his go-to punishment whenever he was upset with me. Zoe waved a lazy hand toward the nightstand. All folded neatly, there were brand new outfits Zachary had packed exclusively for Zoe. A cold gust from the air conditioning swept over me, and I shivered hard. I knelt to drag my suitcase out from under the bed, unzipped it, and froze. The bag was stuffed full of snacks and Zoe's favorite grass-fed organic milk. Zachary lifted an eyebrow at my stunned expression. I knew the lodge food wouldn't agree with her taste, so I brought extra provisions for her. I shipped all your clothes to the local package delivery hub before we left. They'll send them over whenever they get around to it. We were only staying 2 days. By the time my clothes arrived, our trip would already be over. Zoe stepped forward, sizing me up from head to toe. Borrow one of mine for now. Zachary picked all these pieces out. I'm sure you'll love them too. I reached to take the shirt, and a bright red designer tag caught my eye. It was the exact dress I'd fallen in love with months ago. The one I'd insisted he didn't need to splurge on. He'd bought it for Zoe instead. Zachary stepped over, grabbed a towel, and started rubbing roughly at my wet hair. Don't pull stunts like this again, alright? If you can't swim, don't sign up for rafting. I stared at the floor, my chest tight and heavy. Zachary knew full well Zoe couldn't swim either. The difference was he'd chosen to shield her, and leave me to fend for myself. It hit me then. I wasn't even worthy enough to be a third wheel in their little bubble. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and a man's voice came through the speaker when I answered. Are you really going to turn down this long-term overseas work assignment just for your boyfriend? I paused for 2 heartbeats, then spoke clearly. No need to find a replacement. I'll take the position. Where are you planning to go? Zachary dropped the towel, his brows drawn tight with frustration. Overseas. Relocating abroad for work. He locked eyes with Zoe, and they exchanged a knowing, amused smile. They're sending you. Is the company on the brink of collapse? Zachary loved making snide little jabs like this. He'd been the golden child his whole life, top university, prestigious corporate job. Zoe fit that same mold perfectly. Together, they'd always looked down on my bachelor's degree from a regional state university and my mid-tier firm. Don't say things you don't mean out of anger. Come eat dinner. He patted the top of my head in a dismissive, patronizing gesture. I glanced back at the dining table. The soup had skinned over, every plate scraped clean to the glaze, with barely a side vegetable left for me. A knock echoed at the lodge front door. The host poked his head in with a warm grin. We're hosting the resort's annual couples carry contest tonight. Whoever pulls off a bridal carry for more than 10 minutes gets free park entry for tomorrow. UT. Will want to join. I looked toward Zachary, but his gaze drifted straight to Zoe. Zoe nodded immediately. It saves money. Why wouldn't we sign up? Zachary shot me a quick glance. You stay here and finish eating. Zoe and I will compete. She's lighter than you. We've got a much better shot at winning. His words pressed heavy against my ribs, stealing my breath. Zoe had always been naturally slender, no matter how much she ate. Ever since Zachary mentioned he preferred petite women, I'd starved myself down from 110 pounds to 80. Landing in the hospital multiple times from severe malnutrition. I'd thought losing weight would be enough for him, but even then, Zoe's frame was still better in his eyes. They ignored my obvious distress and left to join the contest without a second thought. Hours later, Zoe burst back into the lodge waving free park tickets while I was still dabbing antiseptic into my split knee wound. Mia, don't bother tagging along tomorrow, you walk far too slow. We'd just end up waiting around for you non-stop. Zachary didn't utter a single word of disagreement, silently agreeing with every claim she made. I glanced down at the hiking boots Zachary had bought me, ill-fitting and pinching my heels raw. These shoes hurt too badly to walk all day. When I lifted my head to plead my case, Zachary twisted away, angling that bad right ear toward me once more. I let the argument die unspoken. I'd forgotten, never cared to hear any of my excuses. Shortly after Zachary and Zoe headed back out, I left the lodge to hunt for properly fitted shoes at the nearby shops. As I rounded a corner, I spotted Zachary and Zoe browsing hiking boots inside the same store. I turned to walk away and find another shop, but Zoe grabbed my wrist and dragged me inside against my will. Mia, help me pick out a pair of boots, won't you? Zachary shook his head before I could speak. No need to waste time deciding. I'll buy every style. She can switch pairs if her feet start hurting halfway through the trails. He pulled out his credit card, paid for all the boots, and grabbed the packed bags without glancing my way once. No one stopped to notice me standing there in agony. The stabbing pain in my soles grew unbearable, and I asked a store clerk to pull out a stool so I could sit down. Zachary's face twisted with annoyance when he spotted me resting. You're being overly dramatic. Everyone's sore on a hiking trip. No one else throws a fit about it. When I stayed quiet, he kept talking. We're heading into the national park this afternoon. Wander around the town on your own if you want. The second they walked out, the store clerks began gossiping. That couple's totally head over heels for each other. He even laces her boots for her. What a dream romance. I want something like that. They're such a gorgeous pair. Hard not to stare. I sat alone in the back corner, my too tight shoes digging into my skin with every shift. Ma'am, hiking boots always break in. You want them snug at first. They'll loosen up fast. I shook my head slowly. I need a pair that fits perfectly from the start. I'm done settling for anything less. Zachary and Zoe didn't return to the mountain lodge until 10 o'clock that night. I'd never changed out of my soaked river clothes. And I'd spiked a brutal fever from sitting in damp fabric all day. I dragged myself upright off the couch when I heard them walk into the living room, my vision spinning. Zachary, can you drive me to the medical center? I feel really sick. Zoe stepped forward and scanned my face with a cold smirk. Same old tired trickery, just faking being unwell. Zachary didn't even bother turning his head to look at me. That routine doesn't work on me anymore. Quit putting on a show. This whole trip you've slowed us down at every turn. We're already going easy on you for ruining our itinerary. Don't try to grab more attention by pretending to be sick. A harsh cough racked my frame. I'm genuinely in terrible pain. Zoe wrapped both arms around Zachary's arm and batted her lashes. We could drop her off for a quick checkup if you want. Zachary shook his head firmly. I promised you we'd hit every scenic photo hotspot tonight. You don't want me to break that vow, do you? His eyes locked onto Zoe's. Thick unspoken tension hanging between them. I guess you'll have to make the trip alone then. Zoe shot me a pitying glance. Zachary's voice sharpened with impatience. She's just performing for sympathy. Leave her be. The more I acknowledge this act, the more she'll pull stunts like this. I stopped begging him for help, forced myself to stand through dizzy waves of nausea, and stumbled out into the dark mountain town alone. I didn't know a single soul in this remote wilderness, and I wandered asking resort staff for directions for ages before I finally found the medical center. The second I stepped through the ER doors, my legs buckled, and I crumpled to the linoleum floor. On an ER gurney, the doctor grabbed my phone and dialed Zachary's number. Hello. Is Mia Carter a friend of yours? There was a long silence on the line. Then Zachary's flat, dismissive tone filtered through the speaker. Childish. Staging a whole medical scene for attention. The doctor let out a quiet sigh and tried to explain. This is Mountain Regional Medical Center. We need you to come. Zachary hung up mid-sentence without another word. He claims he can't hear anything on his end, the doctor said, glancing over at me with an awkward, sympathetic expression. It's fine. I don't need anyone taking care of me. I turned my back to him, the cold fluid burning down my forearm. I pulled out my phone to distract myself from the pain, opening Instagram. Every post on my feed belonged to Zoe. Loved our custom couple portrait shoot. The turnaround time for photos is incredible. 1010 recommend. I tapped the link she'd tagged. A photographer specializing in romantic couple sessions. Every photo featured Zachary and Zoe in matching couple outfits, his hands gently straightening the neckline of her blouse. A comment popped up underneath the carousel post. Is a wedding announcement coming soon? Zachary never typed a reply, only hit the like button silently. A bitter, acrid taste flooded my throat, and I doubled over, vomiting into a waste bin beside the gurney. Once my treatment finished, I rushed straight back to the lodge. It was 3 in the morning when Zachary and Zoe stumbled through the front door, still chatting about their evening exploring the park trails. Trips so much smoother without that dead weight dragging us down. They lifted their heads, freezing when they locked eyes with me standing in the living room. Zachary, what are these couple photos all about? Zachary peeled off his jacket, answering without a shred of remorse. Zoe wanted a photo shoot, so we booked one. Zoe stepped forward, a mocking laugh slipping past her lips. You don't actually think there's anything romantic between us, do you? If we'd wanted to date each other, we would have years ago. There never would have been space for you. She spun around, grabbed a towel to wipe sweat from his neck, while he took her coat and set it flat to iron. Their movements synced perfectly, like a long married couple with decades of routine together. That's enough. The last fragile thread holding my composure snapped completely. Zachary, we're breaking up. Zachary froze where he stood, stunned, speechless. Zoe reacted faster than him, eyes glistening with fake tears as she stared at Zachary. She's throwing this fit just to force me to leave. Fine. I'll go then. She spun and sprinted out the front door into the night. Zachary glanced back and forth between me and the empty doorway, torn for a split second before he turned and chased after her. I pulled out my phone and booked a one-way international flight to my firm's overseas branch office first thing tomorrow morning. 30 minutes later, Zachary stormed back into the lodge, rage boiling off him in waves. He marched over and clamped a tight grip around my wrist. All this drama. And look what you've done. Are you happy now? The mountain wilderness drops to freezing temperatures at night. What if something terrible happens to Zoe out there alone? How will you live with yourself? Get outside and help me search for her. Now. We don't come back until we find her. My fever hadn't fully broken, but Zachary dragged me roughly out into the cold dark woods anyway. I shivered without a coat wrapped tight around my frame, shouting Zoe's name over and over through the mountain darkness until sunrise. Dew soaked every inch of my clothing, heavy and icy against my skin. I stumbled back to the lodge bedroom at dawn, mentally unraveled from exhaustion and cold fear. Terrified Zoe might have hurt herself. When I pushed open the bedroom door, I saw Zoe curled up in bed fast asleep right next to Zachary. Zachary mumbled half asleep beside her. I've already punished Mia for you. Don't stay upset anymore. I stood rigid in the doorway, my whole body trembling with unbridled anger. Zachary heard the door creak open and lifted his head, barely registering my presence. You're back. Zoe came back last night absolutely terrified from running off into the woods. So I stayed here comforting her. I didn't get a chance to text you. I stepped forward and ripped the comforter clean off both of them. You sent me searching the flower garden all night knowing I have a severe pollen allergy. Why? Zachary's patience frayed instantly. You hurt Zoe's feelings with your outburst last night. A small punishment is the least you owe her, don't you think? Now do you realize how wrong you were? He sat upright in the tangled bedsheets. My nasal passages swelled shut from pollen exposure, every breath shallow and labored. I turned to rush out and grab my antihistamine allergy pills, but Zachary snagged my arm to yank me back. Apologize to Zoe, and we can pretend none of this ever happened. I pushed him away with every ounce of strength I had left in my feverish body. I can barely breathe. Zachary rolled his eyes in blatant disbelief. Still putting on that act? Can't you come up with a new manipulation tactic? I'm bored of this one. Zoe tugged softly at his sleeve. It's all right. I'm clearly the third wheel here. I'll pack my bags and leave first thing this morning. Zachary's jaw tightened with frustration. Is saying one simple apology really that difficult? I sprinted outside to retrieve my allergy medication, but Zoe stepped between me and the cabinet, swatting the pill bottle straight out of my hands onto the floor. Mia, just say you're sorry. Look how upset you've made Zachary. I ducked to grab the fallen bottle, but Zoe stuck out her foot and tripped me hard onto the wooden floor. Zachary walked out to stand beside her, both of them staring down at me, waiting for my apology. The old split on my knee ripped open on impact, fresh blood dripping down my calf and pooling on the floorboards. I forced myself to meet Zoe's gaze through blurred, tears-tung eyes. I'm sorry, can I have my allergy medicine now? Zachary knelt down, scooped up the pills, and pressed several into my mouth. Then he hauled me back onto my feet. There's my good girl. We can still fix everything between us. Zoe was only testing wedding dress styles on my behalf when we took those photos. We're supposed to file our marriage license together on the 8th of next month. I said nothing, waiting for the antihistamine to kick in and ease my swelling throat. We've already locked in the wedding venue, booked all the bridal makeup and styling sessions. Zoe picked every detail out for you. Zachary's mouth kept moving, rambling on about wedding plans, but every word faded into white noise. I couldn't process a single sentence he spoke. I pushed myself upright and walked straight out of the mountain lodge without another word. Behind me, Zachary and Zoe laughed, chatting about how clever their little plan to break me down had been. I raised a hand to flag down a rideshare car. Take me to the airport. As the plane taxied toward the runway, a text popped up on my phone from Zachary. Zoe's decided she never wants to get married now. I'm taking her to hang a memory love lock at the Overlook to grant her last wish. I left the message unread. No reply sent. From that moment forward, miles and oceans separated us. Every place he went, every choice he made, none of it mattered to me anymore. That evening, as they were packing to head back home, Zachary dialed my number over and over, only to hit my permanent voicemail greeting each time. Panic began gnawing at his chest when my line stayed dead. Worry twisted his thoughts. What if Mia had met some accident deep in the remote mountain wilderness? Zoe pouted and wandered over to his side, tugging at his arm. Why waste energy stressing over her? She's just pulling that manipulative hard-to-get act to make you panic. Zachary's mind spun with unshakable unease, and he shrugged her hand roughly off his arm. Mia had always been so compliant before summoned and cast aside whenever he saw fit, even during our worst fights. She'd never cut off all contact entirely. He laughed bitterly at himself for letting anxiety over her creep into his head. Zachary had never truly thought I was worthy of him to begin with. He'd only pursued me initially because of a dumb bet among his fraternity friends. Words going aroo. ND about that underclassman Mia Carter rumor says she's never dated anyone before. Tons of guys chase her but she stays completely unattached. A total unapproachable beauty. Zach, you've got game. Why don't you go make a move? He'd originally planned to turn them down flat, but the guys teased him non-stop, calling him scared to make a move, drunk on cheap beer. He sent a random text to my profile buried deep in his contact list on a whim. To his shock, I agreed to go out with him instantly. He learned later I'd held a secret long-term crush on him for years, too shy to ever confess my feelings out loud. Zachary had intended to come clean about the stupid bet early on, to set the record straight before things got too serious. But watching me light up rambling about every little trivial joy in my life, a strange softness bloomed in his chest without warning. He started picking up little trinkets, books, flowers, anything he thought I'd love whenever he left the house. Seeing my smile filled him with quiet happiness. My sadness weighed heavy on his heart. But Zachary refused to label those warm feelings love, even to himself. At every fraternity gathering with his friends, he brushed it off as nothing more than misplaced guilt. Everything shifted the second Zoe flew back to the country from overseas. He brought me along to dinner to meet her for the first time, and the second our meal ended, Zoe cornered him alone. Our families go back generations. Severiones always assumed we'd end up together. How could you start dating someone behind my back? Plus, she's clearly not your equal. Her bachelor's from a regional state university. Her family doesn't hold the same social standing as ours. Not right for you at all. At first, Zachary brushed her constant criticism off without care, but Zoe repeated those cutting remarks day after day. And irritation bubbled up inside him. Couldn't tell if he resented her constant nagging or resented me for making her unhappy. Then the winter holidays rolled around, and his parents cornered him at the family dinner table. Firm as ever, the Reeds and Bennetts go way back. We've always looked out for each other's kids. You watch out for Zoe, always. From that holiday forward, he automatically favored Zoe in every small disagreement without a second thought. At first, I'd cry and argue whenever he chose her side over mine. Dealing with messy emotional fights exhausted him, so he'd threaten to break up to end the conflict quickly. He quickly realized that empty breakup threat worked flawlessly to shut down every argument. Every time he uttered the words, I'd force a smile and back down immediately to keep us together. As months slipped by, he grew addicted to that sense of control over me until the day I vanished entirely. Only after I left did Zachary fully grasp how deeply woven into his daily routine I'd become. We'd planned to fly home the same night I fled to the airport, but Zachary sat alone in the mountain lodge waiting for my return until sunrise the next morning. Zoe woke at dawn to find him slouched on the living room couch, eyes bloodshot after an all-night vigil. You sat here waiting for her all night long. Is she really worth this much hassle? Zachary didn't bother answering her question. Panic had curdled into raw, unshakable terror inside his chest. He ignored Zoe's protests and sprinted straight out the lodge door. Zoe threw on clothes as fast as she could and chased after him down the mountain trail. Where are you going? Wait for me. Zachary rushed to the National Park Ranger Station, demanding they file an official police report listing me as a missing person. But the staff behind the desk recognized him instantly. That young lady stopped by here yesterday before she left. She told us if anyone came searching for her, we should tell them she's already relocated overseas permanently. The words knocked Zachary's legs out from under him, and he collapsed onto the concrete front steps of the station. He realized then I hadn't made an empty threat during our fight. I'd meant every word of my decision to leave for good, refusing to accept the truth. He booked the earliest international flight available to fly straight to my firm's overseas branch office. Zoe blocked his path the second he grabbed his suitcase to head for the airport, her face twisted with anger. What are you doing? Have you lost your mind completely? She chose to walk out on you. We know she's safe. Why chase after her now? You were just complaining she was dead weight slowing us down every day. Zachary fought to contain the rage roaring inside him. Go back to the lodge alone. I need to find her. Zoe refused to leave his side, clinging tightly to his arm. I'm coming wherever you go. Your parents asked me to keep an eye on you while we're traveling. Zachary shrugged her off without a single glance back and boarded the earliest flight bound for my overseas city. Once he landed, he waited outside the office tower until quitting time, grabbing one of my coworkers the second they walked out the front doors. He grabbed the man's arm in a desperate grip. Have you seen Mia Carter today? The coworker squinted, recognition slowly dawning on his face as he placed Zachary from Office Stories. He shook his head slowly. Haven't spotted her once today, and honestly, we won't see much of her around here ever again after this week. Our firm only approved 2 long-term overseas work assignments this cycle. One went to the CEO's son, the other to Mia. I heard through the HR team this transfer's permanent, relocating to build a life abroad full-time. A deafening buzz rang inside Zachary's skull, his vision swimming with shock. He stepped back and slid down the brick wall to sit flat on the sidewalk once the coworker walked away. Zoe marched over and hauled him roughly back onto his feet. Sitting moping on the sidewalk like this looks ridiculous. It's just one woman. If she wanted to leave, let her go. This is all just another manipulative hard-to-get act to make you chase her. Mark my words, forget her. If you're that desperate for a girlfriend, I can fill that spot easily. Zachary ripped his arm free from her grip. I don't want that. Zoe's face flushed bright red with humiliation, spinning on her heel to storm off. Before she left, she tossed a bitter warning over her shoulder. I can't talk sense into you, but your parents will set you straight fast enough. She flew back to Zachary's hometown alone, rushing straight to his parents' house to twist every detail of our trip into a one-sided story painting me as the villain. Zach's abandoning his job and responsibilities all to chase after Mia. This spiral can't keep going on. Zachary's parents rushed over to his apartment the second they heard her exaggerated version of events, immediately launching into a lecture about every flaw they saw in me. You and Zoe grew up side by side. There's never been any romantic boundary between the two of you. Why would Mia fly off the handle with jealousy over that? Son, we never approved of this relationship from the start. She doesn't match your status, your education, your family background. Breaking things off with her is for the best. Zachary lifted his head, staring at the unmasked disgust etched across both his parents' faces. It hit him in that moment they'd never once liked me, never thought I measured up to their standards. He remembered every time he'd dragged me home for family dinners, how nervous I'd grown, whispering to him late at night, I'm scared your parents hate me. Sometimes they speak to me so coldly, it feels like they can't stand having me around. Back then, Zachary had brushed my fears off as overreacting, blindly trusting his parents' judgment without question. Now he understood every cruel comment and cold glance they'd directed my way had been intentional all along. He stood upright, running a shaky hand through his messy hair, then took his mother's hand gently in his own. Mom, I've made up my mind. I'm flying back overseas to find Mia. No matter what answer she gives me, I need to hear it directly from her mouth. I couldn't see all my mistakes before, but it's all clear to me now. Zachary argued his case relentlessly, until his parents finally relented and agreed to let him travel abroad again. Go speak with her if you have to, but come home and give us a definitive answer about your future once this conversation ends. Zachary nodded and bolted straight for the airport, pre-reading directions to my international branch office on the plane ride over. His heart hammered with a nervousness he'd never felt before. I'd settled into my overseas apartment days before Zachary tracked me down, blocking him on everything and wiping his number from my phone entirely. Hugo Wilson, my colleague and the CEO's son, glanced over my shoulder and let out an amused laugh, truly ready to cut all ties with him. No second thoughts at all. I flipped my phone screen face down on the coffee table with a hollow laugh. What's there to regret? I used to think I had endless tolerance for mistreatment, but it turns out my limit hit a long time ago. Hugo raised one eyebrow, a playful grin tugging at his lips. I never understood why you picked Zach over me back in college. I was there pursuing you to a wealthy, well-bred gentleman with plenty to offer. I stared down at my coffee mug, lost in quiet reflection. I guess I was blinded by a years-long secret crush back then, even knowing loving him was a hopeless deadened relationship. I'd still wanted to chase it to the finish line once. Hugo noticed my mood darkening and quickly shifted our conversation to brighter topics to pull me out of my head. Don't dwell on old heartache. This transfer's permanent. Odds are we won't ever move back home again. I already spoke with my father based on your years of tenure at the firm. You're guaranteed a rapid promotion within a year or two. Before long, you'll reach an equal seniority level right alongside me. He slid a warm latte across the table toward me with a soft smile. On the house. A toast to escaping your toxic old relationship and starting fresh. The firm granted us several weeks of paid leave to get settled and learn the layout of the new city. Hugo needed no time to adjust at all. He'd spent most of his childhood growing up in this overseas region. He showed me every corner of the city, from downtown shopping districts to our office building, and every surrounding national park trail. By the time dusk rolled in, I glanced over at him hesitantly. We've wandered around for hours. I'm sure you've got other plans to attend to. Hugo scratched the back of his neck sheepishly. I got completely caught up showing you around. Lost track of the clock entirely. My bad. Let me make it up to you with dinner at the city's most famous fine dining spot. We reached the restaurant entrance to find a massive line wrapping around the block. But Hugo steered me through a side entrance straight to a private reserved dining nook off the main lobby. Mr. Wilson. Right this way. Your pre-booked table's fully set up for you. It dawned on me then this dinner invitation hadn't been a last-minute decision at all. Midway through our meal, a familiar figure appeared outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. And my heart lurched in my chest. Zachary. He turned his head, locking eyes with mine instantly, a spark of desperate hope lighting up his face. He tried pushing through the front doors to reach me, but the host blocked his path firmly. He waved his hand wildly, signaling me to step outside. I sighed heavily and stood to walk out into the sidewalk to speak with him. How did you find me? Zachary reached out to grab my wrist, his voice thick with desperate pleading. You left without a single goodbye. Do you have any idea how sick with worry I've been? His brows crumpled tight with distress. The same stern look he'd used scolding me all trip, layered now with raw, unmasked fear. I gently pulled my arm free from his grip. I clearly told you we were breaking up before I left the mountain lodge. Moving overseas was a pre-planned professional transfer. Nothing spontaneous. Zachary's gaze drifted past me, straight through the restaurant window to Hugo sitting at our table. Hugo lifted his glass and offered a casual, calm wave in greeting. Zachary's face turned stone cold with jealousy. Who is he? My coworker, the CEO's son. I kept my eyes fixed on the pavement, unwilling to meet his furious stare. Zachary let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You took this overseas assignment just to run off with him, didn't you? I stared back at him in quiet disbelief. What an absurd accusation. I accepted this role for my career growth, completely unrelated to any other person. He glanced up at the restaurant's fancy signage. This fine dining spot has a four-figure dollar average per table. No regular employee gets treated to meals this lavish by a coworker. I glanced back through the window at Hugo. I wasn't aware of the price point. If that's the case, I'll transfer him the full cost of my meal tomorrow. If you've flown all this way just to hurl baseless accusations and unfounded suspicions at me, I don't have the energy to debate every wrong assumption you've made. Think whatever you'd like. Zachary's lips trembled slightly, panic creeping into his tone. I didn't fly thousands of miles to fight with you. I just need to understand why you left without warning. I want you to come home with me. His voice shrank smaller and smaller until it barely carried across the sidewalk between us. Because I don't love you anymore, I answered without a single beat of hesitation. Zachary froze mid-step, mouth opening and closing repeatedly, unable to form a single coherent word. Hugo stepped out onto the sidewalk behind me, stretching lazily. Your dinner's going cold if we stay out here chatting much longer. He glanced over at Zachary politely. Would you care to join us for the meal? I nodded once. Come sit with us. The three of us squeezed around the small private table, the air thick with unspoken tension. Hugo reached across the table to set a slice of beef on my plate, and Zachary immediately picked it back out with his fork. She hates beef. A cold, hollow laugh escaped me. So you do remember that tiny detail about me. Every meal you planned back home only featured Zoe's favorite beef dishes. I'd assumed you'd erased every little preference of mine from your memory completely. Hugo didn't respond, simply sliding a platter of seafood fully free of red meat toward my side of the table. No worries. I'll keep track from now on. You never have to eat anything you dislike again. Zachary ground his teeth together hard, setting his silverware down with a sharp clatter. She's my girlfriend, you don't get to memorize her likes and dislikes. The two men traded sharp, cutting remarks back and forth across the table, every sentence loaded with unspoken rivalry. I couldn't stomach a single bite of food with the hostile atmosphere swirling around us. I'm not hungry anymore. I'll treat you to another dinner another time. Hugo. I grabbed my purse and headed straight for the door. Zachary chased after me without pause, following all the way to the lakefront promenade outside the downtown district. I finally whirled around to face him, my patience exhausted. Zachary. We've officially ended our relationship. Can you at least grant us both one last shred of dignity? Zachary stepped 1 foot closer to me, desperation heavy in every word. What dignity do I have left when you've walked out of my life for good? His statement struck me as absurdly ironic, been the one tossing my feelings aside for months on end. Yet he acted like I'd abandoned him unprovoked. He reached out to close the distance between us, and I stepped 2 full paces backward. I hold zero romantic feelings for you now. Please let me walk away. Zachary stood motionless on the stone path for a long stretch of silence, then pulled a velvet ring box out of his jacket pocket. I ordered this engagement ring months ago, set aside specifically for you. I never once imagined our story would end like this. I'd fully planned to propose to you at the end of this month. I shook my head slowly. You're being naive. Zoe would have found endless ways to sabotage any proposal you tried to give me. Zachary latched onto my words like a lifeline, jumping to promise anything I asked for. I swear to you, if you fly home with me, I'll cut all contact with Zoe permanently. No exceptions. We'll never cross paths again. I promise. I stayed silent. No response to his desperate bargain. His voice cracked with suppressed tears, raw and broken. Can you honestly say you're willing to throw everything we had away for good? You weren't this cold and distant with me before. I offered him a quiet, sad smile. You've changed completely. And I've changed right alongside you. I tilted my head toward the stone bridge a short distance away, where Hugo leaned casually against the rail, waiting patiently for our conversation to finish. Zachary crumpled to the pavement, defeated. What can I possibly do to earn your forgiveness? My tone stayed calm, cold, and final. I'll never forget every day you spent hurting me. That pain's etched permanently in my memory. But I don't hate you anymore, truthfully. I never truly hated you. I only hate how blind and desperate I was to cling to someone who didn't value me. If you're searching for forgiveness, you can head back home now. I've already let go of all the anger I held toward you. Zachary lifted his head, hopeful tears pooling in his eyes. Does that mean you'll come back to my hometown with me? I shook my head firmly. No, I once thought all I needed to be happy was having you beside me. Nothing else mattered. But I've learned that's not enough anymore. I deserve meaningful friendships, a thriving social circle, a successful career, a future full of opportunity. You're the only piece of my old life I no longer need to hold on to. Go back home. I fought so hard to climb out of that suffocating rut we were trapped in together. Didn't drag me back down into it again. I turned my back on him and walked toward Hugo waiting by the bridge rail. Let's go home. Zachary stood frozen on the lakefront path, staring as Hugo and I walked out of sight together. Do you think he'll keep chasing you? Hugo asked softly once we'd put enough distance between us and the broken man on the shore. I shook my head slowly. I honestly can't say for certain. Standing there beside Hugo, I realized how little I'd ever truly understood Zachary as a person. Hugo didn't press me for more answers, walking me all the way back to my apartment building safely before heading home himself. Early the next morning, loud banging echoed from the apartment hallway outside my front door. I pulled the door open to find the international student who lived directly across the hall hauling cardboard moving boxes out to a moving truck. Did you finish your program and head home? I asked him curiously. He shook his head with a laugh. Some rich guy offered me 10 times my monthly rent to swap apartments with him. Said he needs the unit right across the hall from yours. I don't see what's so special about this tiny studio. But who am I to turn down that much extra cash? Total waste of money on his part if you ask. Megwie's basically acting like a fool. He hauled another box to the truck and drove off with a cheerful wave. Hugo stepped out from around the stairwell corner, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly when our eyes met. Yeah, that fools me. I couldn't predict if Zachary would keep showing up to harass you. Staying right across the hall lets me keep an eye on your safety whenever I'm home. I sighed softly, stepping forward to help him unload his moving boxes into the vacant apartment across the hall. We'd barely finished unpacking the last box and settled onto my living room couch when the front door slammed open hard. Zachary stood in the entryway uninvited, eyes blazing with rage. You two moved in together already. Hugo stepped instantly in front of me, shielding my body from Zachary's advancing frame. We're not cohabitating. I'd just finished moving my belongings into the apartment across the hall. Mia's helping me unpack boxes. Zachary let out a bitter, disbelieving scoff, still lying to my face. You claim you don't love me anymore, and it's all because of him, isn't it? Why would you abandon everything we built just to run off with another man? Tears glistened along the edge of his irises, his voice cracking with hurt and jealousy. I tossed his own words straight back at him. Haven't you treated me exactly this same way for months now? Casting me aside for Zoe without a second thought, Hugo chose not to offer any further explanation to calm his rage. Zachary's chest heaved with furious breaths, and he lunged forward, fist raised to strike Hugo square in the jaw. I threw my body between them to block the blow, and his knuckles slammed hard against my shoulder instead. A searing wave of pain shot down my arm. Hugo's face flooded with unbridled rage, lifting his own fist to retaliate, but I grabbed his arm to hold him back. I stared at the stunned, regretful Zachary standing frozen before me. Zachary's mouth opened and closed as he fumbled for an apology. Save it. Just get out, I said flatly. Hugo's jaw tightened with concern as he glanced at my bruised shoulder. Does it hurt bad? He pulled out his phone right then to file a police report. Criminal trespass on private property, he said coolly. Let's see how many more visa violations you can rack up. Zachary stared at me, his hand lifting to brush the bruise blooming on my shoulder. But Hugo swatted his arm away hard before he could touch me. Get out of her apartment, now. Hugo stepped closer, wrapping a protective arm around my waist to pull me against his chest. Zachary's entire frame trembled with remorse, voice small and broken. I'm so sorry. I was terrified of losing you for good. I lost control. I refused to utter a single word in response, turning my back fully to him to signal the conversation was permanently over. Local law enforcement arrived minutes later and escorted Zachary out of the building for trespassing. Authorities informed us the next day he'd be detained pending deportation back to his home country, banned from re-entering the overseas nation permanently as an individual with a restrictive entry ban. Before his flight home, he begged officials to arrange one final supervised visit with me through the station metal fence separating our two sides. He shouted desperate questions through the metal bars as I stood several yards away. Is there any chance we could reconnect someday in the future? If I fix all my mistakes, would you find it in your heart to forgive me? Do you still carry any love for me at all? I stayed completely silent. No answer offered. I couldn't summon even lingering hatred for him anymore. There was no space left in my heart for romantic love, either. Once Zachary's plane departed back home, I walked across the hall to Hugo's new apartment. Now that he's being deported and barred from re-entry, you don't need to stay in the unit across from me anymore. You can move back to your original place if you'd like. Hugo gently guided me down onto his couch and pulled out a tube of topical pain cream to soothe the bruise blooming on my shoulder. I didn't rent this apartment just to guard you from Zachary. I plan to stay right across the hall as long as you're living in this building. This city isn't always safe for a woman living alone. I want to stay nearby to look out for you. I huffed out a quiet, helpless laugh. The neighborhood we lived in was widely recognized as the safest district in the entire overseas city, with round-the-clock security patrols. I didn't argue further, letting him keep the apartment across the hall as he wished. Months passed after Zachary's deportation, and I threw myself fully into my overseas work projects. Hugo and I collaborated seamlessly on every corporate initiative handed to our department, our workflows clicking into perfect sync together, just as Hugo had predicted months prior. I received a well-deserved rapid promotion within the year. I first heard updates about Zachary from a coworker who flew overseas for a corporate business trip from our hometown firm. Do you know a woman named Zoe Bennett? I nodded once in confirmation. She's been glued to Zachary's side every single day since you left, dragging his parents around non-stop, begging them to push Zachary into marrying her. She claims she's just trying to distract him from missing you. But it's backfired horribly. Zachary can't stand being around her anymore. And even his parents have grown tired of her constant, overbearing presence. My coworker sipped her coffee and kept recounting gossip from back home. As for Zachary, friend who works at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, said he shows up at the airport headquarters every single week begging to reapply for a travel visa. But officials keep rejecting all his requests. They listed him with a permanent entry ban, so no overseas country will approve his travel documents now. He even caused a public disturbance at the customs office a few weeks back. No one's heard how that situation resolved yet. The coworker shot me a knowing, curious glance across the cafe table. Speaking of relationships, how are things with Hugo Wilson? Word spread back home his father's absolutely obsessed with you, hoping you'll become his daughter-in-law one day. I smiled and shook my head. My full focus is on advancing my career right now. Romance can wait for some undecided point down the line. Once my coworker left the cafe, I returned to sorting stacks of corporate paperwork at my desk. Hugo wandered over minutes later, curious about what gossip my visiting coworker had shared with me. When I stayed quiet and refused to elaborate, he leaned forward anxiously. Did she mention my father's hopes of you becoming our family's daughter-in-law? I lifted my head to lock eyes with his flustered, hopeful expression. Sounds like you leaked that conversation to her on purpose, didn't you? Did you bribe my coworker to bring up the topic unprompted? Hugo scratched the back of his neck, cheeks flushing bright pink with embarrassment. All right, I might have dropped a hint to her beforehand, but every word of it's the honest truth. He leaned forward across my desk, voice soft and nervous. What are your thoughts about us, long term? I stared at his earnest, hopeful face and let a soft, genuine laugh slip out. I turned back to sorting through my files, a faint, playful smile tugging at my lips. Guess you'll just have to prove you're worth it. Then,